It took nature hundreds of millions of years to evolve a bacterium and billions of years to make a grasshopper.
Thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well.
Hello, family. Welcome back. I know that evolution is the last thing on a lot of your minds. However, as an educator who sees the battlefield on a daily basis with this topic, I want to fully and utterly destroy the evidence that they have, because it is being taught as evidence that proves we don't have a creator. It's taught as a fact. It's not really taught as a theory by most, and I have witnessed that firsthand. It's been challenging, not because I was teaching it, but because it is getting more difficult for me to say things, be ignored, and just watch the same thing go on over and over and over. And so I'm going to try and fight this battle in different ways. And one of those is actually looking at the evidence, creating curriculum that does that. And the goal of looking at the evidence for evolution isn't to prove it, but to disprove it, because that's what happens when you stare at this evidence hard enough. You're going to see that it falls apart. And so one of the places my journey took me was to their beloved proof of the horse, or the missing link to the modern day horse, because they say there's all these holes in the fossil records, but one of them that we have just so happens to be the horse. And they draw out these fancy drawings, just like they do with the evolution allegedly of ape to man over millions of years. And that's another one of those lies we've looked at already. But the horse goes from little bitty, about the size of a puppy dog, all the way to the giant stallions you have today, even though they came from these giant beast-looking dinosaurs that went extinct and then somehow devolved after their extinction. But the narrative would have to keep going. I mean, when does the size going from small to big stop? Do they just keep going until they're the size of bacteria? Where does this nonsense stop? Who knows? But when you look at all of them and you look at each one of them, what the modern day experts say, they eliminate one of them automatically, and that's Pliohippus. But we're going to be looking at Eohippus primarily today. This is one of those that was discovered by a man, and his name was Othniel, if I'm saying that right, Othniel C. Marsh. And he was in competition with another guy. These guys were devout Darwinian evolutionists. We get, talked down on for having bias towards a creator and intelligent design. But these guys were in a frenzy. There were bone wars, literal bone wars, where people were trying to be famous. They knew they could get famous with this worldly wisdom, and they were doing everything they could, and a lot of fraud was produced. There was the Piltdown Man hoax. There was the Dino Bird hoax in recent times, actually. There was the false embryo drawings by Ernst Haeckel. The moth experiment, the beloved peppered moth experiment, was actually falsified as well. They were gluing dead moths to parts of trees that they didn't normally live on. A lot of things going on to support all of the major alleged proofs that they have. And so this guy here, Othniel, was extremely prideful, wanted to be famous, and was in competition with that other guy named Cope. And so this guy here, Mr. Marsh, together with his competition, it says they discovered 142 species of dinosaur. that's a lot considering there's only 700 known or somewhere around there. And the interesting part of the story is that only 40 were considered valid. That means that 72% of their findings were falsified, deceitful, and just flat out wrong. And so that leaves me to think that the others could also be investigated. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking at the little missing link to the horse here. Its common name is Hyracotherium, and it's formerly known as Eohippus. You'll see that a lot in textbooks, but it was said to be a primitive horse that had 4 hooved toes on the front feet and 3 hooved toes on each hind foot. And so this is one of those things that didn't stand out to me at all when I was looking at this. I was just going out here looking at obvious evidence of fakery, and you can see this horse died around a lot of fish, obviously here, but it has 4, they call it hooved toes in the front and 3 hooved toes in the back. And the size of this thing, again, like I said, it's about the size of a little puppy dog, you know, your modern day dog, and quite smaller than even a person. And the official specimen you see here, this is one that's in a museum, has the same fish that we saw in that first little fossil. That is most likely a replica, because all of these things, even though they have the fish in different positions, they died in the exact same positions. Some of them deeper in the rock. They had a little fish in his stomach right here. Probably the fish that killed him. They all died in a bed of piranhas here. Look at another one here, different colored bones, same depth, same fish in the stomach. They even cloned some of the fish and some of their fake fossils here, trying to make it look like we have a lot of missing links, I assume. But those are the ones I kept finding. But what is really strange is how identical the body of this thing looks to a capybara, essentially a giant modern day rodent. This thing is what I believe is to blame for this deception. They have falsified one of these skeletons because their habitat is in the savannas near dense forest and bodies of water. So if they were to die, there's a chance there could be some fish by them, but unless they got caught in a fishing net, I highly doubt there'd be this many fish around them. Or if there was some sort of flood wiping out life on Earth, that would be a good reason to have fish all around a body. And so nothing untruthful there with all the fish. But you have another one here. Look, he actually died catching a fish. This little guy, he caught one, was bragging to all of his friends. Then disaster struck. So another fish thing there. But there's the front toes. They said they have 4 hooved toes. Remember that in the front? Well, let's check out the back side of this creature. They have 3 toes in the back. The capybara, their hind legs, I've never knew that, have 3 little toes. Isn't that adorable? 4 in the front, 3 in the back, just like this fossil that allegedly turned into a horse. And if that's not enough evidence to show you that these things most likely are related to or descendants from the capybara, we also have an animal actually called a hyrax, which is very similar to the name that the creature has been given. That's known as Eohippus or Hyracotherium. Sounds like a disease. But this creature here, look how cute and cuddly it looks. You would not expect its skeleton to look a lot like this. But again, it's almost identical, almost like they shaved off some of the jaw like they did with the Piltdown Man. Would have been easy to do with the technology back then and the frenzy to make a lot of money. And so the Hyrax, still alive today, also has 3 little cute toes in the back. I mean, look at that thing. Have you seen anything that cute in a while? So precious. And their little paws right here. I mean, it looks like something off of the Gremlins movie, you know, Gizmo, that little bitty hand. Precious little thing. 4 in the front, 3 in the back. And this creature, again, is more of the exact same size and dimensions of Eohippus, and also in habitats that would be more similar, just like the capybara or capybara, however you say it. I know there's different ways to pronounce it depending on where you're from, but in my opinion, this is definitive proof that not only these fossils are fakes, They're not an Eohippus. They are more likely one of these critters, just modified, and they're always really dark, as if they've just been probably painted with some wood stain just to make them look old. Add some little fish in there. These guys are pretty crafty, but that's why we see them striking the same pose and cleverly decorated to look ancient. You know, get the bone fragments here. Let's make it look really ancient and decrepit and just be artistic. This stuff is created like the images of our fake earth models they give us. They just have artists that do these things, and that's how you get famous, get discovered, and make wealth and have things end up in textbooks all those years ago and are still in them today and will be for a long, long time. So when you start eliminating the ones that they say took millions of years to evolve, you only have a couple that are valid, allegedly, in between the horses, and they only have the little 3 toes in the front and 3 in the back because they're devolving. Even though they're getting larger and more powerful and better at eating, somehow their little toes are devolving. Don't know why that would happen, but that is the story they give us, and the evidence when you compare it to other little, modern day or near modern day horses they find, these creatures have the same types of phenomena. You see fish everywhere. When has a horse or any horse creature ever died grazing and just been surrounded by fish? It makes it look like these are either really falsified fossils or they're accurate fossils from a flood, a worldwide flood, when the waters would have been extremely diverse. This must have been the fish that, when the waters receded on higher ground, they were left there to die, because you got to imagine the waters were up high. How did fish die when there was a lot of water? Because they can swim. The waters receded, and it left all the living creatures that were already there starting to petrify, with fish that were then in a thick mud, I'm assuming. And so you have the evidence you have here that appears to be missing links, but it's the creatures that didn't make it onto the ark or just some falsified fossil. More proof that there is a flood and that the creator is true than these types of fossils. But looking back to all of their narratives about how animals got onto land, it gets even phonier because there's missing links. This is allegedly our missing links right here. Ichthyostega, Tiktaalik, or Tiktaalik, however you want to say his name. He's got 2 A's there. These creatures learned how to walk on land, and it was just one of them, though, that evolved that ability and somehow found a mate. How did this thing mate? There would have to have been another one that evolved alongside it, but went out onto land, laid its eggs, and somehow fertilized its own eggs. If it was laying eggs, who knows? But if it was coming out of water, they probably didn't lay the solid goose eggs like you see today. Fish eggs are a lot different than your modern day eggs of chicken and certain reptiles that lay eggs, alligators, turtles. And so going out on land, if it laid its eggs would have been soft. They would have dried up and died. And so lots of holes in that story there. But they try to pretend this stuff is more than what it really is. And so when you look at the fossil of this guy, this is one that one of my fellow coworkers gave me in a book, saying that there's proof that these things happened. And so I investigated it, just like Eohippus. And you do find there are some fossils of this guy striking a pose. Talked about this before in another video, but it's worth mentioning again. And when you start looking at the other fossils of this creature, you see the same thing that you see with Eohippus. They all died in the same pose, and they're all just artistic copies of the original. And that makes me believe that even the original is most likely falsified. I mean, even this one here, you could tell they tried. They sprinkled some hay around it to make it look like they just found it in nature. However, look at the top of it right here. This looks like somebody's walking path. You know where they lay stones out near their driveway? They have some like mortar mix here in the middle. Like they put these stones down. That's what it looks like. They just used somebody's walking path because they were lazy at the fraud factory and didn't want to go out and get a big stone. They're like, hey, let's just use this man's walking path by his house for our fraudulent evidence. No one's really investigating this stuff. And so that's what they did there. So not only did these things allegedly walk out on land, they got real comfortable doing so And as they adapted to land and became more wolf-like, then they just decided to go back to the water and turn into whales over millions of years. And now we have killer whales, and that's why they're so smart, because they've just fully evolved into what they are today. And this stuff just is laughable. So we're going from one environment to the next and then devolving back. And only now they're back and they're larger. And it's ridiculous. And that's why they can breathe, because they just started swimming and eventually holes appeared in the back of their heads. You know how it works when you start swimming in the water a lot and then you give birth. I don't know how you're going to give birth in the water, but maybe they did somehow, and their little wolf-like pups were able to just swim and survive in the water. I don't know. It's just crazy. You have to have a lot of faith and a lot of imagination to believe these things. But looking back at the first land walker 365 million years ago, one of those lies, and allegedly 300 million years later, that one little critter that came out and was able to somehow find a mate that also evolved and came out, produced all of these different size beasts. Look at the difference in sizes and scales and weird shaped tails and spikes and nice little mohawk shaped heads, triceratops, all of everybody's favorite dinosaurs. We were obsessed with these things. All of that allegedly came from something like this and made it around the world. Quite impressive for only 300 million years. 300 million years, that is not a long time to do all of that. So I don't know how these things swam to the locations they were at. I guess they blame Pangea and they put the maps up right there like that's how it was possible. But even with Pangea, with everything being connected on a globe, makes no sense that much life and diversity and size and changes in kind would be possible. You've got your herbivores, you've got your meat eaters, you have your plants as well evolving. You would have had to have plants evolve fast enough to be eaten by these giant long necks. Imagine these things weighing tens of thousands of pounds, having enough food to supply them. There would have to be a lot of vegetation, more than the rainforest we have today, or these things would have wiped them out. So the evolution narrative is provably false when you look at this stuff and even do the math to try to prove it if it's possible. It's not. And that's why they need fraud. That's why we need things like the Archaeoraptor that are still in textbooks today, even though this proclaimed missing link by Nat Geo, even though it was proven to be bits and pieces from at least two different animals by some Chinese farmer with a feel for what paleontologists were looking for. He knew what they wanted. They want those missing links. You produce one, you get fame and notoriety. If you find proof of the flood or proof of the Red Sea crossing, that stuff is censored. But this evidence here, or false evidence, will make you world famous. That is a bias in science. So anyone tells you you're being biased in your research, bring this stuff up. There is 100% bias. All of these discoveries made in the 1800s and the early 1900s were by people with an agenda. They wanted to prove Darwinian evolution was true. And when there's no evidence, you start faking things. And it leads to some sad situations. Things like the Oda Benga incident at the Bronx Zoo. Things that we've talked about before. Things that are heartbreaking because they rely on false drawings as opposed to real science to show people who the missing links are. The guy that drew these false drawings right here, guess what? His drawings are in your children's textbooks today. His name is Ernst Haeckel. Not only was he racist in his scientific ideologies, he was fraudulent. He drew these embryos. And apparently you and I look a lot like a fish, because here we are on the right, the humans. Look at the fish, salamander, tortoise, chicken, pig, cow, rabbit. We all look the same, according to him. This was in the 1800s. And not long after, when actual photos of these things were taken, he was proven to be a liar. And evolutionists today will admit that, yeah, he was wrong, but the images serve their purpose, so we will allow your children to see them. This guy was quite artistic. That's why his images are so prevalent today. He put a lot of them out there. That's how he got famous. and he is well known for this, well known for his fraud and his racist imagery. But cancel culture has yet to say anything about that. You think they'd be all over this stuff. The Bronx Zoo is still there. This young man didn't fare so well. 10 years after this or so, he ended up committing suicide. Such a tragic life for this guy. Because his teeth were filed down, they claimed he was a Darwinian missing link, when in reality it was a tribal custom, and he was put on display to make money for some people who were extremely evil with their racist evolutionary thoughts, not scientific thoughts, but racist thoughts. This was a young child, and they gave him, I heard, a bow and arrow so that he can defend himself against the larger apes in there, and he started firing them at the people that were making fun of him. It is something that I don't know how it could have happened. It wasn't that long ago. This was, again, the 1900s, people. And I'm not race baiting with this, just showing you how sad and evil the evolutionary ideologies can be, and how they rob your children of true excitement for researching our origins. When you teach people about this and you show them the truth about creation and how complex life is, these children are excited. When you tell them they're meaningless pieces of pond scum that turned into what they are, it hinders them from wanting to really explore the complexity of life. You want kids interested in biology? Show them the truth. Show them the breadth of life at work that has made them who they are, and it will really set them free. It will give them purpose. They will treat people with respect. They won't let this incident here happen again. They're not going to put people on display. So take heed to those false teachings. Protect your children. I'm wanting to do more with creating curriculum. I want to design a website for people who are struggling to find ways to teach their children to counter these lies. They will run into them, if not in high school, in college, even in elementary school. They have these things in books, middle school. I've seen those false evidences as a kid, and so I know they are seeing it as young children. It's on TV, it's in movies, it's cartoons, it's everywhere. So we need to be prepared and unite as parents and educators to protect our children at all cost and teach them things that are true. So that's it. I know this is kind of long-winded. I'm passionate about this. I want to do more to expose these lies. And so I thank you all for helping us share this stuff, showing it to your children, showing them how false this evidence is, and the proof we have that the Creator's words are true, and that He is a great and merciful, loving Father who sent us His Son, an example to live by. And when you live by Him and His example, you're going to see that the world is going to start persecuting you, unlike when you just kind of comfortably go into modern day Christianity. It's quite different. The more you study, the more you really try to learn, the less your beliefs align with others. That's okay. Enjoy the persecution. We're only here for a short while. It's worth it. But that's all I wanted to share. Hopefully we can continue putting this stuff in books and online and making little journals where you guys can pass these along to your children. But in the meantime, I love you guys. I'm going to get back to some time with the family. And I love you. The Father loves you. We'll see you around very soon.